Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you took us away to die in the wilderness?
Why must we die?
Fear not! Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. The pillar of fire! It is the breath of God! Great one! You cannot breach the fire of God! Gather your families and your flocks. We must go with all speed. Yes. Go where? To drown in the sea? How long will the fire hold Pharaoh back?
Will it hold?
After this day, you shall see his chariots no more. No! You'll be dead under them. The Lord of hosts will do battle for us. Behold his mighty hand. God opens the sea with the blast of his nostrils. Lead them through the midst of the waters. His will be done. He opens the waters before them, and he bars our way with fire. Let us go from this place. Men cannot fight against a god.
Better to die in battle with a god than live in shame.
Praise God and down into it!
Deliver us from the sword of Pharaoh.
Peter, help us!
Never mind the wheel. Pull for your lives.
Is your life worth so much?
fire dies.
Sound the pursuit. This is work for a butcher, not a pharaoh. Destroy them all, but bring Moses to me alive.
Rebels, here! Hard!
Here, take him.
Grandfather, look! The horses are coming!
The chariot. Ah! Run, run, run behind. Ah!
Better to serve the Egyptians than to die here.
Who shall withstand the power of God? Thou didst blow with thy winds, and the sea covered them. Who is like unto thee, O Lord? From everlasting to everlasting, thou art God.
And now we're getting ready to head back south to the actual crossing site. And here you can see the beach where the waters opened up. We're standing at the exact spot.
Wow.
Yes, and the mountains of Saudi Arabia in the distance.
Did your knees get weak sitting there? Was it an awesome thing
It was
to behold?
quite incredible, yes, to be there. And so in the foreground, right in front of us here, is a melted beach where the sand and the stones were literally melted together like concrete.
Really?
This is not loose sand. This is a melted beach which the pillar of fire created when it stood here. So,
Separating the Egyptian army from
Yeah.
the fleeing Israelites.
yeah. So again, this is more evidence, that confirms the location
My
here.
goodness. Now, how did you find out about that?
I had heard about it, and then I saw it myself, So here it is. You see this rock is just infused in with the sand and the little rocks there. And this is all hardened. This is like concrete.
That is amazing.
Jason here is stepping on it. It's very solid. This is a different area.
How did the locals explain this?
I asked the hotel owner was here with us that we know, and he says, I've never seen this before. He said his hotel's in a different area, but he was amazed at what he saw. So,
Well, there's the evidence right there. It's solid.
Right. And so piece of it was broken off for us to look at. And you can see up close here, all the little rocks and the sand, they're melted together, infused by the pillar of fire. And this goes on for some ways. This isn't just one little spot. And so Ron Wyatt went scuba diving out there, and various things have been found in the water. You can see human femur bone that is coral encrusted, which would be something you would expect. And on the left here, we see a normal one. On the right, you see the coral encrusted femur from one of the soldiers. On the top left, you see a human rib cage stuck in the coral.
Now, what about people who say, "Oh, this is table coral"?
It's not, because it has metal in it. And so here's a horse's hoof that's shriveled up when they took it out of the water. It's shriveled up. So again, we have horse parts, human parts.
What are we seeing here? What is this coral?
And so this is coral standing on an axle, and it has a raised center hub with spokes going outwards. Here's another round chariot with a raised center hub and then spokes going out, and it's got a round shape to it. Again, it's covered in coral.
Do some people say that these are just modern shipwrecks?
Some people have said that, but again, this agrees totally with the design of the chariot wheels. With a raised center hub and using metal detectors, there is metal in the center. There are spokes going out. This is a 4-spoke wheel with 3 spokes left. 4-spoke wheels, 6-spoke wheels, and 8-spoke wheels are found here. Of course, using the metal detector, like he's demonstrating here, all of the hubs here contain metal, and that is the design of the Egyptian chariot wheel with the metal center hub. Now here is a gold-plated wheel. There were 600 choice chariots used in the Exodus, we're told, so you would expect to find 1,200 chariot wheels here with gold, and this one is special. It's gold-plated, and 2 or 3 of these were found by Mr. Wyatt. Now we see a more shallow area where the Red Sea crossing took place. It's shallower here compared to the north and compared to the south. It's still deep. It has to be a deep area. It's 2,800 feet deep, but that gives you a 4% grade, which is manageable. Over in Saudi Arabia, you see the remains of the pillar that was found there. On the Saudi Arabian side, it was cut down by the Saudi authorities. It had Hebrew writing on it. We don't know where it is. But there in the Saudi waters, Viveka Ponton went scuba diving, and she found this beautiful chariot wheel in the Saudi Arabian waters. So you have chariot parts on the Egyptian side, chariot parts on the Saudi Arabian side.
But it's not the crossing site. It couldn't be.
That's what the critics would say. But the evidence is here. It's real. So we rented a boat and went out with a Rove, a remote operated vehicle. Had a 100-foot tether, and so we were going to do some little inspecting ourselves.
This is a submarine camera.
Yes, for a few hours, and we didn't have days and weeks to do this. We had a few hours. We rented the nice boat here to take off. We headed down toward the south end of the beach. We're headed toward that area, and you can see the waters extending over to Saudi Arabia in the distance. And
so were you stopped by the Saudi authorities like Leonard Muller was?
Sometimes they do, yeah. If they suspect you, they'll come over and see what you're up to. But so now we're in the approximate area, and we're gonna throw the drone into the water.
So you closest to which land is that?
We're close to Egypt.
Close
here,
to Egypt.
Saudi,
right.
Sinai Peninsula. So we're getting it ready for another launching here. So here's the camera. It's got 3 propellers. And it's giving us a live feed back up into the boat. And so that day we were able to see something. It looked round, but we couldn't confirm that it was a chariot wheel. So here we're launching it. And then here's an instant replay on board the Rove. The Rove's videoing this. And so we're down in the water.
So where you are is not that deep where you are right here.
Right,
close to the
it's
land.
not that deep, yes. And so you can see some coral parts here.
But again, coral doesn't grow on sand. There has to be something for it to grow on.
Something, yes.
So obviously there has to be something down there.
Yes.
But this area is very remote. I wouldn't imagine that it's, pieces from from modern humans, because why would they be there? There's nothing there.
Yes. So some of these objects here may be from the Pharaoh's armory. We can't tell for sure.
This is fascinating. So we have the video from the Red Sea crossing. Thank you for showing us your trip down there. After the break, we are going to come back and talk about Mount.
Exodus 14:19-31. Power revealed. Alfred Hitchcock was a master of suspense and was known for his groundbreaking special effects. One of his better-known effects was in the movie Foreign Correspondent. He sent a camera ever closer to the surface of the ocean. Then he rear projected that ocean scene onto a screen in a room set up like a cockpit. The effect gave the illusion the plane had crashed into the ocean.
Mr. Hitchcock, you've kept us in suspense through 2 commercials. How did you manage to get a shot where the view inside the cockpit went all the way down to the ocean, into the ocean, and the water came in?
Very simple. You heard of rear projection.
Yeah, when they show the picture on the back of a
Show
screen.
a picture on the back and you play the scene in front of the screen. Well, I had a test pilot go out off Santa Monica and dive with a camera on the front of the plane toward the ocean and pull out at the last minute. Then I had 6 screens made, 8 feet wide, 6 feet high, built the cockpit, put the pilots in, and then the screen, made of rice paper. Behind the screen were 2 what we call dump tanks with chutes. These tanks are filled with 2,700 gallons of water each. And all I had to do was press a button. And as I looked at the screen, the moment we touched water, I pressed the button and the water shot right through the screen, tore it to ribbons, and all the water came in over the pilots.
That's
very simple.
The screen that there you go. Get a hand for solving that problem. The screen that was being projected on of the ocean coming up then actually was the screen that burst and the water came out. And nobody
made
knew.
of rice paper, you see?
That's
so
ingenious.
Water, 2 chutes came right at it.
You've done a lot of things like that, and they really, I think that would be part of the fun, would be solving those undoable problems.
Sure it was, yes.
Yeah.
We're crazy to stay here. When she hits the water, the tail's going to be the best place. All right, come on, let's get back there. Come on.
What movie do you remember profoundly, impressing you with its special effects? What were the effects, and what did you feel when seeing them? Understanding the context. Exodus 14:5-15:21. Death had taken every firstborn son except those of the Israelites. Afterward, Pharaoh ordered all the Israelites out of Egypt along with herds and flocks. After 430 years in Egypt, they left the only home they had ever known. Before they left, their Egyptian neighbors gave them gold, silver, treasures, and clothing, a detail God had foretold. Scriptures say the Israelites left the land of Egypt in battle formation. Although the terminology can apply to a troop formation, the emphasis here is on an orderly exit as opposed to a frenzied fleeing mob. The Israelites, who had lived as slaves for generations, had no equipment or training for a military conflict or conquest. What they did have was dignity, and they demonstrated that in their departure. Bolstered by God's mighty miracles, the Israelites were confident when they left. The battle formation gave them, though, the ability to protect themselves from a surprise attack by bandits or raiders. Rather than use the northern route to Canaan, God led the Israelites south towards the Red Sea. This route would take longer. It also led the Israelites into a seemingly impossible situation. They found themselves between the Red Sea and the Egyptian army. God had a couple of reasons for this. First, he would harden Pharaoh's heart so that he would pursue them. Second, God was going to receive glory by means of Pharaoh and all his army. He was putting the Israelites into a seemingly vulnerable situation. But his power would be revealed in his people's weakness. This is a biblical principle. God uses moments of weakness to bring himself glory. God had led the Israelites to this specific place because he knew they would be completely defenseless apart from his defending them there. As you read Exodus 14:19-31, look for phrases "the Lord" with the verb in the blank, or "he" referring to God. Underscore the verbs in these phrases. What do these phrases reveal about God as the rescuer and redeemer of his people? How does this apply today? The escape.
And the angel of God, which went before the camp of Israel, removed and went behind them. And the pillar of the cloud went from before their face, and stood behind them. And it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. And it was a cloud and darkness to them, but it gave light by night to these, so that the one came not near the other all the night. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left.
Pharaoh became angry because his slave laborers were gone. When reality set in, he got his chariots and troops ready and set out after the Israelites. Pharaoh's best chariots and finest troops were no match for what he was about to face. Verse 19 refers to the angel of God. This is likely the same angel of God that appeared at the burning bush. The angel is closely associated with God himself, as indicated by the interchangeability of the title, the angel with God, or the Lord. This was the presence of God. It came as a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire at night. The repetition of the phrase "moved behind them" stresses the pillar's changing position, from guiding them then to separate and protect them. The sentences are so simple yet so incomprehensible. The Lord turned the sea into dry land, so the waters were divided. God also separated water from dry land in his creation of heaven and earth in Genesis chapter 1 verses 9 and 10. But instead of a spoken word, it occurred when Moses stretched out his hand, something God directed him to do. As the Egyptian army got closer, What do you imagine they thought as this pillar of fire separated them from the Israelites? When have you seen God make a way when it seemed there was no way? Key doctrine: God is all-powerful and all-knowing.
And the Egyptians pursued, and went in after them to the midst of the sea, even all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. And it came to pass that in the morning watch the Lord looked unto the host of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and of the cloud, and troubled the host of the Egyptians, and took off their chariot wheels, that they drave them heavily. So that the Egyptians said, Let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fighteth for them against the Egyptians. And the Lord said unto Moses, Stretch out thine hand over the sea, that the waters may come again upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots, and upon their horsemen. And Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to his strength, when the morning appeared, and the Egyptians fled against it. And the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea, and the waters returned and covered the chariots, and the horsemen, and all the host of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. There remained not so much as one of them.
Verse 23. This verse proposes two changes. First, the Israelites had either completed their trek through the sea. Second, the pillar no longer restrained the Egyptians. These two changes prompted the Egyptians to go after the Israelites. The Hebrew word translated pursuit means to have hostile intent to overtake someone. It is believed that Pharaoh did not send the foot troops into the sea because they would have been much slower. He sent the horses, chariots, and horsemen. They were the strongest and most effective military resources of the day, and hundreds were coming. The sight and sound of their approach produced shock and awe. Verses 24 to 25, the Israelites' crossing took all night, completing their trek in the morning, believing to be between 2 and 6 a.m. The Lord looked down and threw the Egyptians into confusion. Many speculate problems with the chariot's thin, narrow wheels had difficulty in the sandy sea bottom or entangled in seaweed. Regardless, God was ultimately responsible. The Egyptians' chariots were the envy of the ancient world, but God rendered them useless. We have a God who fights for us. Therefore, lean into Him. Trust His ways and His timing. Pray that your faith in Him would be greater than your fear of the unknown. Verses 26 to 28. The first time Moses stretched his hand over the sea, the waters parted. This time they closed. Pharaoh's hardened heart and arrogance led his army into the water. The water began to close at daybreak. This allowed God's people to see His mighty work. Not even one survived. This verse does not state that Pharaoh died, but in the book of Psalms it does reference his death. Moses did not know God's full plan, but this can serve as a reminder that God does, has, and always will have a plan. How does it influence our faith to know that God is always in control?
But the children of Israel walked upon dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the seashore. And Israel saw that great work which the Lord did upon the Egyptians. And the people feared the Lord, and believed the Lord, and his servant Moses.
Verses 29 to 30. Verse 29 reminds us again about God's promise of walking on dry land. Pinned between the Red Sea and the Egyptian army, the Israelites had no option but to turn their backs to the Egyptian army, walk and place their complete trust in God. After the crossing, God's people stood on the shore with dry feet, sandals, and clothes. The mighty Egyptian army, with its chariots, weapons, horses, and soldiers, floated on the Red Sea, defeated and lifeless. Verse 31, God exerted his great power against the Egyptians, and Israel saw this with their own eyes. Seeing meant more than just observing. It also meant absorbing, to the point that the people's heart changed. They moved from panic to praise. Exodus 15 contains the first song of praise in the Scripture, the song of Moses and the Israelites rejoicing because the Lord has thrown the horse and its rider into the sea. The Lord has become my salvation. In what ways has your faith been strengthened as a result of seeing God's power? Why is praise the natural response when we have seen God work in a meaningful way? Apply the text. God will lead his people and make a way when circumstances seem bleak. We can know God is always in control. When we see God's power, our faith is strengthened.